right, Jay, if y'all want to do a little introduction of who you are, we're going to get started about the North Carolina Shipwreck Project. Thank y'all for being here. I'll turn it over to them.
How you doing? I'm Marc Corbet. This is Panda Daniels, and this is Jay King. And we've started a group called the North Carolina Shipwreck Project, and we're trying to dive and document every wreck off of the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and really off of North Carolina. And it just started out as we're a group of friends that like to dive together, and I've been working on the dive boats for years. So we sort of got a little more focused, and we're putting up a website. We're starting to get it together, and we just want to do it sort of as a public outreach thing so that we can tell y'all about what's out there, where it is, and what it is. Because these shipwrecks that we dive, you know, you saw 2 of them in the last 3 weeks or so, and they come and go, and they disintegrate down on the bottom, and they're metal, most of the ones we dive, and they're falling in. So I've kind of been thinking, if we don't document these things like they are, at some point in time, they're going to end up just big rust scours on the bottom of the ocean. So we're doing everything we can to promote shipwreck diving on the Outer Banks. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's gotten small. There used to be like 7 or 8 dive boats around here. Now there's 2. And one that's sort of semi-retired, and he's only taking people that he has been diving with for years. So we're trying to generate interest, and the Outer Banks has a lot of shipwrecks, as you know. And the thing a lot of people don't understand is we're so close to the Gulf Stream here that you get this clear blue water as soon as you get into the Gulf Stream, and it's warm and blue. This is the light vessel 71 off of Hatteras. This is a light ship, and it was sunk during World War I because it was relaying messages that a German submarine was attacking a vessel called the Merak. And I can't think of a shipwreck that more exemplifies Outer Banks diving than light vessel 71, because it was out in the middle of a really treacherous area where 3 bodies of water meet. Cold water from the north, warm water from the south, and then the Gulf Stream kind of surrounding it. And there's shoals, diamond shoals, that stick something like 14 miles out to sea, and it's just a perfect place to wreck ships. They hit those shoals, go down, and they do everything they can to avoid going around them. But back in the day, they didn't have modern navigation, so they'd wreck. So we've got these hundreds of shipwrecks out there. I figure there's something around 90 to 100 of them that are diveable, because some of the wooden ones come and go. They get buried under the sand. But I think the Diamond Shoals light ship, it's kind of deep, but it's out in the Gulf Stream, and it was sunk trying to protect ships from treacherous waters, and she's about 190 feet deep. That's kind of part of Outer Banks diving. We tend to dive some kind of deeper wrecks. You know, a lot of places you go diving, it'll be like 30, 40 feet deep. We're quite often diving over 100. This one's 190 feet. This is our coastline, and some of the shipwrecks are out here in the red dots. You can see there's a whole lot of them. And we like to go diving, and we're out there out of Hatteras Inlet on the boat I work on, but we dive out of Oregon Inlet, we dive out of Morehead City, we dive kind of around North Carolina. So the light vessel sits right where it was anchored when the Germans sank it. It's about 190 feet deep. That's the bow of it. It's wooden, and it's kind of halfway a modern vessel and halfway an old vessel. which kind of represents the kind of shipwrecks that we have around here. It was a wooden vessel, but it was covered in iron. And it was just basically a beast that was designed to be able to take all these waves while it was out there for 6 months at a time. And it's kind of modern, kind of old. That's the generator that used to drive the lights on the lightship, you know, so that could warn the ships off the shoals. So it was modern enough to have a gasoline engine on it, but also kind of made of wood and wasn't real fast, wasn't real maneuverable, but it's a really neat wreck. But what you see here is these shipwrecks are covered in corals, and the fish are just completely surrounding them, and they've turned from vessels into reefs, and sometimes it's hard to see the shipwreck through the sea life. And we dive all kinds of shipwrecks around here. This one's deep. This one's in 190 feet of water. And this is the wreck that's under the bridge near Rodanthe here. This is a landing craft that had been turned into a barge. We dive these kinds of shipwrecks. We'll dive shallow shipwrecks, deep shipwrecks. This is a deep shipwreck. This is the E.M. Clark, the diver in technical diving gear. This is my brother-in-law, Eugene. And that's a 250-foot deep wreck. So right here you're at 3 feet, and here you're at 250 feet, but it's all shipwreck diving. We go inside shipwrecks. This is Panda lighting up the inside of a wreck called the Manuela off of Portsmouth Island. This is a wooden shipwreck. This is called the Explorer. It's right out off of Nag's Head Pier. Some of these shipwrecks are close to shore. Some of them we take a 40-mile boat ride to get to them. But we dive things like wooden shipwrecks. We dive these big iron, massive shipwrecks. This is the Lansing, which is out off of Hatteras. We dive shipwrecks where nothing's left but the cargo. We dive unidentified shipwrecks. We're trying to figure out the names and identities of certain shipwrecks. But they were talking to us tonight, and they said, hey, this is sort of a Christmas time thing. And they asked if we knew about any shipwrecks that happened on Christmas. And I certainly do. It's called the Winks Wreck. It's up in Kitty Hawk near Eckner and Luke Streets. And this is the steamer Mountaineer. The Winks Wreck is located just south of Luke Street in Kitty Hawk, about 75 yards off the beach, just in front of the first house south of Luke Street. And this is from the New York Times, 1852. The British steamer Mountaineer of and from Liverpool for New York was totally wrecked on Christmas Day, 8 miles south of Currituck Inlet. The crew were all saved. So I first dived this wreck probably about 15 years ago, and at the time it was kind of unidentified. Nobody knew what it was. And I started trying to figure out what it could be. And this is from David Stick's files in the Outer Banks History Center. And this is source is from American Beacon, Wednesday, December 29th, 1852. And it talks about the Mountaineer going aground on Christmas Day, and she was wrecked. Couldn't get her off the beach, couldn't be salvaged. She was an old steamer and had been purchased by a company in New Brunswick, Canada. And the thing that stood out to me here was that her machinery was detached and her smokestack before sailing and the whole brig rig. So she was not operating at the time she ran aground. She was being sailed, because in these days they had sails and steam power on the vessels. And that came into play later. She was built in 1835 by William Patterson Scott Shipyard in Bristol, England. Patterson's known for building the SS Great Western in 1838, which was the first commercially viable transatlantic steamer. Like before that, when you got on a ship, they didn't leave till the ship got loaded, so you might sit for a couple weeks waiting to embark. And then you were at the mercy of the winds, so nobody could predict how long it was going to take for a voyage. But the Mountaineer, this is a picture of a ship that would be very similar looking to the Mountaineer. It's the United Kingdom. She was what's called a packet. And with the steam engine, they became able to move the ship at a pace which they could keep a schedule on. So no longer did you have to wait for the ship to fill up and then take however long the winds made it take. You could actually schedule a voyage and be reasonably sure you were going to get there on around the day that you were supposed to get to your destination. Mountaineer would have looked similar to this inside. She had what is known as a side lever steam engine. It's a British design, and they were not produced outside of Britain very much. There were some made in the United States, but not a lot. This is a drawing. You've got two steam engines, a boiler, and these weird looking things sitting off in the sand. And I could not figure out what they were. This is a picture of a side lever steam engine. And here's another one. Wait, yep. And notice the cylinder over here to the right, and it's got a crosshead on it, and it drives that lever that's down low in the ship. And that turns the paddle wheel machinery. When I was trying to figure out what this ship was, I pulled this picture up online. I typed in early British steam engine, and that came up. And it about knocked me out of my seat sitting in front of my computer, because this is what's on the Winx site. And that is a crosshead of a side lever steam engine. So then the next question I had was, well, how many other ships like that wrecked around here? And the answer was one. And it had an American-built side lever steam engine, and I already knew where it was in Kerala. So I'm already going, wow, this probably could be the Mountaineer. And what you're looking at here is the top of an air pump, which is another part of a side lever steam engine. Here's another picture of part of it. And this is I actually went and pulled the newspaper article in the Virginia archives. And unfortunately, it didn't have any more information than David Stick had copied down. But in this newspaper article, it said that the machinery had been detached, meaning they'd taken the paddle wheels off of it, stuck them on the deck, and made it so that the ship could sail faster with the dead paddle wheels out of the water. And it said it had broken down and they were sailing to Norfolk or New York for repairs. Well, this steam engine here has the crosshead on it. The one to the right of it, out towards sea, is this engine. And what you'll notice on there, no crosshead. It's broken. So then the next piece that I saw that is this. That's the crank arm of the paddle wheel shaft, and it's lying on its side, sticking out of the sand. That's not where it would be if the ship had wrecked with those attached. And then the other paddle wheel shaft is right here. This is a picture taken by Jim Bunch in the 70s. And you see the two paddle wheel hubs there, and then the shaft. And what you'll notice, there's no shipwreck next to it. That shaft should be inside the ship driving the wheels. It's fallen out towards sea. So the only way it could be there is if these things had fallen out of the ship. So I've got pretty good evidence that the machinery was not where it was supposed to be when the ship wrecked. This is showing when the Mountaineer was for sale in 1846. In here, it said that it had round boilers, and it also said that it had copper and wood construction. On the site, you see that piece of the boiler there? That's a rounded boiler. It also said that it was iron boilers, and there's clearly rusty iron tubes in the boiler pile. I say boiler pile because these shipwrecks fall apart. It's been getting hammered by waves for close to 200 years. So the next thing was copper and wood construction. You see these shiny copper spikes will be sticking out of the bottom, out of pieces of old wood. So this is how you identify shipwrecks. You're looking for clues. You're looking in old sources, and you're looking at what you've got on the site. And everything that I have seen on that site matches up exactly to being an early British steamer. Now, what's cool about the Mountaineer, and I didn't realize this till I did a little more research, she was built in 1835. There's only one steamer built any earlier than that wrecked off the North Carolina coast, and that one's still missing. We haven't been able to find it. That makes the Mountaineer the oldest steamship that you can dive in North Carolina, and it's right off the beach in Kitty Hawk. So, that was the Christmas Eve disaster of 1852, and we go dive that site. We dive a lot of other sites around the Outer Banks. And now I'm going to introduce you to Panda. And this is Panda underwater here. And she's diving a very deep shipwreck here. This is the Manuela. And I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thanks, Mark. Do you guys have any questions for Mark before I get started and try to follow what he just laid on you?
Quick one. What's the name of the shipwreck in Kerala?
The shipwreck in the Kerala that sticks out of the water is the Andrew Johnson. And she was formerly the USS State of Georgia. She was towing the ironclad Passaic next to the USS Monitor the night the Monitor sank. So she was also captured something like 12 to 14 blockade runners during the Civil War. There should be a plaque for it. That's something we're kind of looking at trying to do.
All right, Mark.
All right, I'm gonna try to speak so you guys can hear me. Let me know if you can't. So, Manuela, that was an awesome experience. That day was killer conditions. You can see we're 160 feet down. You can see the detail. We're going into the wreck a bit. I'm a little bit newer to diving than Mark is. So I was certified Halloween of 2018. And so it's only been about 5 years ago. And my 11th dive was the Proteus, 122 feet. That was an interesting day. I think I did my safety stop upside down, but I did it. And they continued to let me dive with them, so I've just been picking their brains ever since, all hours of the day and night. But that's how you get better. What I wanted to do when I talked to these guys, and they were kind enough to host us here at the distillery, is provide an outlet to share the information that Mark documents with his awesome photos, and you'll see some of Jay's video in a bit. I've taken a few photos, but I lost my camera on the Manuela coming up on the boat. So not really task loading just yet. This is technical diving, and this is walking out under a bridge. So that was the wreck that Mark was talking about under the jug handle bridge. It's just a few feet deep. You're like in the mud looking at it. So that's under the jug handle bridge, the new bridge. So this is Mark's nephew, Jude. This is, we have a really awesome tight-knit group of people that we dive together and support each other in our team and just kind of look out for each other. You have to. the conditions are volatile. There's a reason there's all these wrecks to go see. Lion's Paw is the boat that we dive on. Mark is the first mate, and he just recently went for his captain's license, so it's Captain Mark now. This is Captain Dave Summers. The Lion's Paw is his lovely vessel that we go out. They went and grabbed some balloons out of the water. They're a nice catch. There's Mark looking handsome at the helm. So to dive North Carolina, dive anywhere, but to dive North Carolina and do some of the technical stuff that we're doing, you have to have a lot of gear. You have open circuit with the tanks there. You got Jay's rebreather, his Ghostbuster backpack, I like to call it. So open circuit, if you don't know, that's when you can see the bubbles you're hearing. That's in the videos. Jay's really quiet. He can sneak up on the sharks. They don't hear him coming. But in the wintertime, when the off season, we have to maintain our gear, our regs. Mark's showing us how to rebuild some of our gear. We have, the one shop here, but we have to send our things off if we can't take care of it ourselves, and we don't always have the parts and pieces that we need. So it's sort of bringing everything together here. This is Jay and I on a wreck we did last summer? Last summer, yeah. So I don't know, Mark, which one was this?
This is the Empire Gym.
This is the Empire Gym, okay. Killer conditions. I mean, you can see the bait ball. You can see us kind of checking it out. And the first color, you lose your reds and oranges as you go down. So everything always looks super blue. And then you'll catch a glimpse when like somebody has a bright enough light to bring out some of the colors. Here's our trailer that houses the compressors. This is where Mark fills all our tanks. He gets there before anybody else to make sure we have the breathing gases, the mixes that we need, whether we're diving air, nitrox, a little bit of helium when we can. This is getting really pricey. Working into that trimix. But yeah, all of our stuff is housed there, fills our tanks, we get them onto the boat. Safety features, we have oxygen bottles all over the boat. Just this, let's see, what was it, March? I did the rescue diver course with Jay. We weren't unable to do some of our dives here in North Carolina, so we did have to go down to Florida to get in the water. You know what? I'll take Hatteras over Florida any day. Over Puerto Rico, over Mexico, anywhere else I've been, I'll take Hatteras, truly. When Hatteras is good, it's world class. There's something about it, I don't know, it grabs you. And the stories and the history and the wrecks adds so many layers to it. So this is the ladder we come up with, those fins and all that heavy gear that goes into the water. I was safety diver this day. This is Jay and our friend Joe. I went down with them. I didn't go all the way down to the wreck because they were going past my limits. I'm good to 165 right now as far as depth is concerned. And that was on the light ship that Mark told you about a little while ago. So it was about 190. And I was there to make sure if something went sideways, I had extra breathing gas. I was there to lay eyes on people, relay to the captain, relay to the other first mate that was on top side if anything went awry. So I was there communication, because when you're going to these depths, you can't just go to the surface if something goes wrong. So those extra bottles that I have under my arm, I would be able to hand that to somebody, whoever needed it, and I would be able to go communicate. So it was key for me not to go into decompression if I needed to go to the surface quickly to relay any information. Yeah, the bins.
Exactly.
Yeah. Decompression sickness. Yeah. So this is our friend Sean. He's an amazing diver. He's gonna kill us for this picture. He works over at the aquarium. He's done some really killer work for National Geographic and the History Channel. You can see some of his stuff on Drain the Oceans. He's a great guy to have on the boat. And Mark's nephew, Jude. This kid has come so far. They've been going down to, he and his dad have been going down to Mexico. They're well beyond my limits at this point. They've done cave and just killer experiences. This is another day that I was safety diver, so I'm helping everybody get their things together. They were diving the E.M. Clark this day, and that's 250 feet deep. So Marc was the only open circuit that day. The rest of the guys were on their rebreathers. They had 22 minutes of bottom time and an hour of decompression. And so that is a drift dive. So they're jumping off the boat, like SEAL Team 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, and landing on the wreck, hopefully, and coming up together at exactly 22 minutes. So all of those things are accounted for. This stuff is planned. Nothing's left to chance as best you can. You need, the captain knows the plan, the safety diver knows the plan, everybody's on the same page coming up together. So they would shoot a bag, this would pop up to the surface, we'd lay eyes on it, I go in the water, count them, make sure everybody is present, and just kind of back and forth between the captain to these guys as they're decompressing. So this is what you get to see. Trust me, the first time I jumped in and on the Proteus, I didn't know I had not seen a shark in the water. I'd seen fins on the beach. I'd seen fins, out in the water trying to surf or whatever. It's a different experience when you can breathe and you can see them. And you're looking up at that water as deep as it is and you can see the boat. I don't know how to explain it to you. It's worth every scare. It's worth every penny. It's worth every moment. Okay? Which one was that?
120.
That was at 120?
Yeah.
That was on the Proteus?
That's from the bottom at 120.
Yeah. So those are all sand tigers hanging out with us. They're really chill. They don't look like it, but they are. They're little snaggle teeth. Yeah, they just cruise by you, man. They don't, treat them with respect. Don't try to pet them. This is one of the wrecks that we dived. This is the FW Abrams. This one's about 80 feet, and this is off of Ocracoke. You can see a spadefish, and it's just, I don't know, there's nothing like jumping in the water and you get down and you see this structure coming up at you. The life is amazing. The history of these vessels, but then they're all their own biome of life. It's pretty insane. It's such a privilege to be able to see this. This is the Abrams still. This is the engine. The Abrams hit a mine off the Hatteras minefield in June of 1942. But just like that, you can see the visibility this day is just killer, like all the details into the sand, and there's just stuff tucked up all in these little crevices. I mean, you could just sit there and focus on one thing for the whole dive and still be enamored with it, This is the Dixie Arrow. We dived the Dixie Arrow a lot. She's in about 90 feet of water. There were 11 fatalities on the ship. So you have to remember that and know that some of these spots are grave sites and be respectful of that. Let's see. The Dixie Arrow was also torpedoed in 1942. And that was the sister ship to the Abrams that we just saw. And this was a steam engine from the Dixie Arrow as well. She was built in New York in 1921. You can see some more of the variety of life we have here. Sometimes the bait balls are so thick you can't even see the wreck. And that's an experience, like if you've seen videos of how the fish all move as one, and when you're inside of it, it's disorienting, but it's just incredible. I don't know, it's so cool. So this is the Steam Ferry Idaho. She's 160 as well. The first time I dove this, that was the deepest I'd gone at that point. And I mean, textbook, beautiful, beautiful conditions. You could see the light all the way down. It was insane. She was built in 1864, and that was a New York City ferry boat. She sank in a storm in 1895 on the way to Florida, and she's there off Hatteras as well. And so this is the steam engine here, and then you can see a paddle wheel there behind that. And this is a really fun photo. That was a walking beam steam engine, which is a little different than the one you were describing earlier. All right, so this is back to the Empire Gem. The Empire Gem was built by the same company that built the Titanic. She was also torpedoed in 1942. It was a busy year. And she was built in Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland. She was diesel powered, and this is the rocker arm shaft on top of the diesel engine here. And so if you had asked me any of this when I first started diving, what the shipwrecks look like, I would have been like, I don't know. The sharks have teeth. So Marc's been working on helping me understand. We took a trip up to the Mariners Museum, and that made a big difference on understanding what these pieces look like and being able to continue to dive them and starting to recognize stuff because they're encrusted with coral and life and everything. So at first it all blends together and everything kind of looks the same color. But as you start to remember pieces, it builds on it, and I'm just gradually learning more and more and more about it. So I'm really grateful to be able to pick their brains again. It just even on the history of the wrecks and what I'm looking at. And this is, Empire Gym is in about 140 feet, and that's the south of the Diamond Shoals. And so this is the Proteus. This is the first ship that I dove off of Hatteras, so that one will always be kind of special for me. It's in about 120 feet of water. There was one fatality of a crewman who jumped overboard and drowned, but everyone else was rescued from the Proteus. And the Proteus was built in Newport News in 1900. And she sank in August of 1918 in a collision with the SS Cushing. But like, you can see, just, it's fascinating to see this stuff. It's kind of turned over on its side. This is the prop shaft boilers from the Proteus. And there's like all kinds of eels and fish and different creatures kind of tucked into these things when you get closer. And this wreck was more broken up. They did some depth charges during World War II because they mistook the Proteus for a submarine, a German submarine. I love this photo. That's such a cool perspective, right? This is of the Manuela again. She was also built in Newport News, and she was torpedoed in 1942 off of Portsmouth Island. My camera's somewhere in there, allegedly. This is the bow of the Manuela, and it's lying on its starboard side. This thing is massive. So I went down with Marc, and I was holding the lights for him, and he's like a torpedo underwater himself, okay? And I'm like clanging on my tank, because you can't talk to each other. Like, wait for me. I'm working on it. So this is back to the E.M. Clark. I have not been down all the way to the Clark. She's 250 feet of water. But there was a previous slide where I was helping the guys get ready, and this is what they were diving. But just the details of this. So there is a, what's the sister ship to this? That was you showed me at the Maritime Museum.
I can't remember the name.
But anyway,
there's a model of a ship at the Mariners
it's
Museum.
Like this big.
And the cool thing about the Clark is it's almost intact. Like a lot of the other shipwrecks are like broken up, but this one's so deep that it's still kind of together. And you see the lifeboat davits there? That lifeboat never made it off the ship. And they're pointed towards the inside.
So these are the boilers inside the E.M. Clark. And the E.M. Clark was built in 1921 in New Jersey. So this is the USS Tarpon, which sank in 1957 on the way to the scrapyard off of Ocracoke. It's in about 140 feet of water, and that was built in 1935 in Connecticut. And this is the bow. You can see the hatch there. The Tarpon's a really cool wreck to dive. It served in the Pacific during World War II. Now this is coming to a whole different area. This is the SS Hesperides, and this ran aground on the Diamond Shoals in 1897. So this one, she's only in about 40 feet? 40 feet of water, depending on how the sand is shifting. So that's when you're seeing a lot more light come down, and you can see the oranges and yellows a little better. I've made it to the shoals one time in 5 years. The currents running through there are pretty gnarly, so a lot of times we don't even get to anchor in out there. And this is some of the iron ore here, all broken up in the hold of that Hesperides. Yeah, the water moves pretty quick through there. That wreck is like climbing a ladder. You're like holding on, just pulling yourself along it. So this is the British Splendor. There's a photo floating around. I don't have a copy of it right now, but there was a big old white shark on the British Splendor last year, a big one. The British Splendor was also torpedoed in 1942, and that's off of Portsmouth Island. She sits in 100 feet of water, but it's upside. The way it landed is upside down. That was built in 1931 in Palmer Shipyard in the UK. And you can see this is a really big crankshaft right there. We have a conger eel peeking out here. And you can see where some of the lights are pulling up some of the rust colors, and you can see a little more detail than you can farther away.
Oh, not. You're back.
My favorites. My favorites. What a photo of Marc. These are all Marc's photos. Like, we have to give him credit. I did not take any of these. That speaks for itself. It's amazing. Here we got some more sandbar sharks. We have some red snappers and Almaco jacks kind of hanging out. There's a couple of rays down there in the sand. I love this one. It's like a drive-by. He's like, what? They just kind of cruise past you, man. And it's, until they don't. So far, so good. Nah.
Not usually.
Not usually. Now you get down there with some people that are spearing, they get a little more lively, they start paying a little more attention. You should start paying more attention. Don't turn your back on them. Keep up. Eye to eye. Some sea turtles here. We got a little nurse shark hanging out in the gully under the edge of the wreck. Some more red snappers. Little shark hanging out at the remoras on it, giving it a little cleaning bath. And a Goliath grouper. So it's hard to see the size of this guy in this shot, but that one, what would you say that one, how big that was?
I'm going to say it's 10 feet long. That's a ship's mast lying next to it that's easily 3 feet around. It could really swallow you.
Lionfish. So they're real pretty to look at, but they're invasive and they're everywhere. You can eat them. Just saying, they make great fish tacos, ceviche. Cut the spines, clean them up. Don't grab them. Don't grab them.
Yeah, they don't feel good.
No. We do our best to spear what we can when we go down in the current and conditions allow for it. If the current's running too hard, you're not trying to handle a spear at those depths. Understandably so, but when we can. Jay and I filled a few zookeepers full as much as we could.
What's the best? Tile fishing?
The best, whatever's on your plate.
What do you have on the plate?
Groupers.
Groupers.
Okay, fair enough.
We got some jacks and some bait fish coming through here. We do angelfish. We get some of the tropicals, because as Marc said earlier, we have the different waters coming through. We have that warm Gulf Stream coming through. And there's our lovely spade fish that we have all up and down. You can see those just off the shore or as deep as you can go. So that's my part. Now it's Jay's turn to give you a little view.
That's
I caught them talking. You have watched the movie. That's the part was. While you're encounters for sharks, would ever have any clients would wish edgy just go out that day. And secondly, as the video.
Yeah, it's right there.
Not yet. And not yet.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what you call treasure, too. I like rusty things, so.
So, hey, Jay King, I've been diving about 25 years. I am a scuba instructor, but I really don't like to teach anymore. So it's kind of annoying and keeps you from diving things like this. Seriously, I live up in the Raleigh area, and for probably 6 or 7 years, I hardly ever got to fun dive because I was teaching all the time, and I got sick of it, so I don't teach much anymore. But I am not a professional videographer, so this isn't as good as what Sean would shoot, but it is what I do with a GoPro 9. This is the British Splendor, and these guys stole a lot of my thunder about talking about these. But the first clip here, this is bow wreckage. This is nothing compared to what you see, the bait fish on like the Dixie Arrow. Like Panda said, they'll be so thick you can't see. I've actually put my camera away on the Arrow before because I wasn't going to be able to shoot anything. The Splendor was a tanker sunk by the U-552 on April 7th, 1942. And like Panda said, it's about 100 feet, 12 lives lost. So we all like sharks. And like these guys said, the big female sand tigers don't really bother you. The little males can get a little odd in the spring. And so these guys were a little aggressive, but watch how fast they can move when they want to. I call it knuckling in the water, but, and there's another shot of it coming up. Another one, a different one. My buddy Joe was behind me. I swam over this guy and I didn't realize he was going to scare it and have it shoot out from underneath me. Took me a little bit by surprise. This is the light ship these guys were talking about. And remember, this is 190 feet deep. That's the kind of clarity we can get when the Gulf Stream waters come in. Just crazy. This is swimming down the port side. Let's see, Mark already mentioned how it was sunk, and now we're coming back down the starboard side. But again, look at all that coral, and 100 feet of visibility on this thing at 190 feet. Just crazy. Mark mentioned that it was wooden, and you'll notice some of the pegs on the beams here that were holding the deck down. But also realize that's wood that's been down there for over 100 years. And that's how solid these ships were built. And there's a little bit of light so you can see just the colors that you can get when you do throw a little bit of light on something. Stupid lionfish there. Another thing to notice coming up here in just a second, well, first you'll see Jude and Eugene swimming towards me. But you're going to see a couple of small portholes. And if you go look at an old picture of the LV-71, you'll see these tiny portholes about like this down the side. There's two still in there, solidly in that wood, and they still have glass in them. So, yep, there's Jude and Eugene.
You mentioned the temperature. How consistent is it down there?
80.
Yeah, that time of year, it's probably 78, 80 degrees. Although we're going to see an example of a thermocline here towards the end. Not on this video, but on another one. And okay, so you can see that little round thing in the bottom left? That's a porthole. Still in there. And it's not this one, but the next one coming up. I get enough light on it that you can see the glass still in there. But it's amazing to me that wood is still there after 100 years. You can see a little bit of a glint.
Yep.
So next up, the Dixie Arrow that these guys have talked a lot about. This first clip here, I love this spotted eel because they don't like to come out in the daylight a lot. But that guy's probably 5-6 feet long. Really neat. How many rays do you guys see in this picture? There's actually 3. But this guy's getting annoyed with me, so he's going to hop up. That's why I was lifting up a little bit, but he's going to take off in just a second. This is a different day, but this day was one of the most bizarre I've ever seen. There were these 2 rays that just kept swimming around the boilers and the engine, just circling them. And I've never seen them just constantly do that, but I love watching these guys swim. Like I think Panda mentioned already, the Arrow was sunk by a U-boat actually in World War II, as were most of these. So yeah, if Mark was shooting this video, you'd see video of the boilers and the engine, but it's me, so you're seeing fish and stuff. But I just love watching rays swim around, so I love it when they will actually get up off the sand. Yeah. They were talking about sharks, and these are the boilers of the Arrow straight back there behind this guy. Probably the thing that scared me most underwater was on an anchor line doing deco and a bait ball and amberjack shooting through the bait ball. And I'm just standing there going, one of these idiots is going to hit me in the chest and knock the wind out of me. So there he is again. And like I said, it's me, not Mark, but the engine is to the right there. That engine is often covered in lionfish, so it's a really good spot to take a zookeeper down and just fill it up in a couple of minutes. And yeah, that. An evil triggerfish there, if you missed that. Actually, the only thing that ever has attacked me underwater is a triggerfish. They will tear you up.
So what is the worst thing that's ever happened?
To me? Probably the scariest thing was on the EM Clark at 240 feet, and my pressure gauge was reading 0. I was still getting air. I knew everything was fine. This is a Goliath grouper. He's probably bigger than me, but we were playing chicken, and he decided to go up over me. But I was still getting air. I knew I had air in the tanks. Problem was I had no idea how much I had left. So I got out of the water. And yeah, I love it when you find a turtle under there.
Take you an hour to decompress that. Is it 200 and something?
Yeah, I probably spent an hour on deco. But I had decompression tanks. So once I hit like 120 feet, I was off of my back gas and wasn't worried anymore. But yeah, not knowing how much gas you have at 240 feet is not a good feeling.
But this is something you don't ever do solo generally, or no?
No, I would never be that
Very
deep.
dangerous.
Very dangerous. You're dependent on your
Well,
buddy.
you don't start out solo.
This is what that's Mark.
There's crazy risks. So
Yeah, crazy risks. So this is the EM Clark. This is my favorite wreck. First, Mark was talking about deterioration. This is looking into a hold on towards the stern. First time I dove this, you would not have been able to see through there. It's on its starboard side, so what you're looking through there at is the bottom of the ship, and it was not rotten or rusted away like that. So my buddy Joe and I went into the hold. It still gets pretty dark, so that stairway would actually be going down from this perspective. It's a 2,000 lumen light, and that's all the light you'll get at 240 feet out of it. But we were having this discussion that sand tiger shark decides to come check us out, but again, they just go away. Like Mark mentioned earlier, we were having a discussion earlier. You don't plan to do a dive this deep solo. You would never try it solo, but in your planning, you assume you might be having to get out by yourself. So now Joe and I are coming back down. That's one of the masts, right, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
And he and I came out, and our actual target was to go into the engine room. So like Mark said, the Clark is 200. We were at about 220 feet. We didn't get any deeper than that, but to the sand there is probably 250. So it's going to take us a minute to get the engine room. So Mark stole a lot of my thunder on this, but the reason I love this wreck is specifically because it's hasn't been depth charged or wire dragged. It's still pretty much intact. Yep.
another two-parter.
Sure.
How long does it take to swim down to 190 feet? How long does it take to swim up 190 feet?
I can sink like a rock, so it typically wouldn't take me more than about 3 minutes to get that deep, if that long. Coming back up, you'd never want to go faster than 1 foot per second, so 60 feet per minute. I actually try to go a little slower, especially if I've been this deep. So this is helium, a trimix dive. If you're going to dive below about 180, actually if I'm going to dive below about 140 feet, 150 feet, I'm going to use helium. helium off gases faster, which increases the chance of a decompression sickness. So I tend to come up even slower from this depth. But yeah, that 25 minute bottom time bought us over an hour of decompression. Gets really boring at 20 feet when you're there for 10, 15 minutes.
So you don't want Mark fill the tanks. This is a mixture of gas.
Right, it's a mix of gases.
Incredibly important to
Right, and the other thing is the oxygen content. The air you're breathing now is about 21% oxygen, and that actually gets dangerous below 180 feet. So this was, the gas here probably had 16, actually on my rebreather on this dive. And now we're going into the engine room, so Mark can point out some engine parts. But this gas, because of the rebreather, was probably only 12% oxygen and about 50% helium.
The consequences are like you hallucinate.
Well, the helium is taking that away. You're not dealing with the narcosis. Right, yeah.
Yeah, the helium takes away the narcosis, and you can lower oxygen content with it.
Right.
And you can mix it on the fly, what you're getting, or
He does
the
a
rebreather
rebreather.
does that on the fly for you. Yeah, it's got
You can
two
adjust
bottles
his mix.
So now we're coming back down that port side of the boat. And what was the second part of the question?
Yeah.
Oh,
They do.
all right, I bored him. So this is the Empire Gym, and if the shark will get out of the way, you can see the prop back there. And again, I get distracted by the big fish instead of looking at things. But what I was going for here, I don't know if you noticed in that picture that Panda showed, the turtle and the nurse shark up underneath the wreck a little bit. Well, turtles and nurse sharks like to wedge themselves up underneath stuff to take naps. So I'm going back into this little swim through back here around the prop to see if there's anything wedged up underneath here. And the only thing I found were more sharks, so more sand tigers.
Yeah, they like it under there.
Yeah, let's see
Nice grouper.
yeah, nice grouper. There you go. Now this was actually my buddy Joe and I on our rebreathers. This was a fun day because the Empire Gym is actually split in two. You got the stern section that we're on here, and the bow section's about 100 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the current was running bow to stern on the wreck, so we actually just let go, went away from the stern section and drifted to the bow, which we had never done before. Unfortunately, the visibility got pretty bad, so there's not a lot of video of that. But yeah, I was actually hoping to see a turtle or something up under there. Just more sharks.
Just more sharks.
So there we go. There's Joe and his rebreather. So the way this works is that you've got the two tanks on the back. One's pure oxygen, one's a diluent gas, and it's mixing them for you. And there's a scrubber inside that's taking out the CO2. So this is the Idaho, that paddle wheel steamer. And Panda mentioned swim through. Well, I'm about to swim through it. So sorry for the shaky camera here for a minute. I was probably excited about all those red snapper. But yeah, I'm going to swim through the boiler here. It's actually being towed to Jacksonville, Florida. You guys didn't mention, but it had basically a bow on both ends and was used in New York City as a, what do you call it, Mark?
Ferry boat.
Ferry boat.
Yep.
So they were towing it to Jacksonville, Florida to put it to work down there. Yummy snapper. So what'd you say that part was, Mark?
Those are the paddle wheel shafts.
And there's the tie-in, so Mark was good enough to go in and tie that anchor in so that we didn't have to drift around. This is about 190 feet. Again, it was a really good day. That's probably at least 60, 70 feet of visibility, so we were pretty happy with it.
So you say it's great diving at these depths here. What are the physical demands that are different than when you're at a different, depth?
Really, and on this day there wasn't any current. The real problems you run into off the coast here that you don't get in, say, the Caribbean are current, and having to fight a little bit of current during the dive. It can be colder, obviously, than the Caribbean, and then just the boredom of decompression. Or decompressing in a current, you're basically hanging onto an anchor line and you feel like you're a flag. You're getting beat to death. I've come out and my shoulders were just numb from having to hold on to an anchor line for an hour. think it's fun for the first 10 minutes, and then it gets old really, really fast. You see, even on the Idaho, I don't know if you saw that little tropical down there, but we actually do get tropical fish up here. Manuela, this is in the engine room, and I think I got a little bit of video of the Goliath grouper that likes to hang out in there before Joe and I swam through. Also sunk by a U-boat in 1942. The difference is most of the other wrecks you saw were tankers, and this is actually a freighter. Yeah, there's the grouper way back in there. I decided not to swim that way. Yeah. I'm like Mark, I do like engine rooms, so.
You know why all the particles are in there?
Because you went in.
Because I went in first.
We don't scissor kick. If you are a scuba diver and you learn scissor kicking, we try to frog kick, which keeps your fins up and so that you don't stir up the bottom. And Mark, I've already forgotten. What did you say this piece of machinery
That's
was?
part of the shaft alley where the prop shaft went through it.
You all mentioned there's less dive ships. I mean, obviously, ECU has a maritime and coastal study stuff. What's the impact of their activities on this as a hobby or as research?
They're always real focused on what they dive on, so they'll go do a project, but they don't get to pick what they're going to dive on as much as we do. We can go, hey, let's go to the Idaho today. It looks like a good day for it, you know?
Got it.
But they do a lot of research when they come and do those projects.
And I guess one of the things that excites me about this more is that you can see how broken up most of these shipwrecks are. And like I said, the Clark, you couldn't see through originally, and that's just 10 years ago. These things are going to be rust stains on the bottom in another 10, 20 years. So this is an example. You see all the sharks up there, and this is an example of that thermocline. So it was about 78 degrees down to about 120 feet, and then a really abrupt 5-degree drop. So the sharks were up hanging out in the warmer water. A couple of times, this is on the Proteus, and a couple of times they've actually been all around the anchor line, and it's a little disconcerting the first time you try to drop down an anchor line through a wall of sharks like that. But it's kind of fun, and they really don't care. And they just kind of drift there in that.
They usually just sort of cruise around until they don't.
Yeah.
Shoot a grouper and they'll get real aware.
And this is, so the prop shaft is on my left here, and this is swimming back down towards the stern of the ship through the ribs that have collapsed in. Usually a lot of grouper, and again, I shoot fish, so a lot of grouper and a lot of lionfish and snapper in here.
That's why the decompression's hard, because you're waiting to get the fish on and cook it.
Pretty much.
There's a barracuda.
Yeah, nice big barracuda. Barracuda come up and hang out with you during decompression, so that's always fun. And this is a different day, so you can tell the visibility isn't as good on this day, but it's a pretty good shot of the props. Those are, 6 feet long, you think?
Mm-hmm. Easily.
Very big. And again, I get distracted by the no thermocline today, so this is more usual for the sharks to hang out plastered to the bottom. And there's an angelfish for you.
Pretty.
So I'm usually sweating on the bottom, and his brother-in-law Eugene is freezing. So he'll have on a 7 or 8 mil. And if I didn't have to wear a wetsuit to keep from getting stung, I wouldn't most of the time. So
I hate to be cold. I'm always in wetsuits.
So, any questions? Yep.
Okay, fully. No, do you got too many type of night dogs? So,
I have done a night dive off of Hatteras, but that is when you see the other side of sand tigers. So we don't do them anymore. But I was working for JT Barker at the time. He runs one of the dive boats down there, and he called me and said, "You want to go for a night dive?" I was like, "A night dive? Okay." So we got about halfway down the anchor line, and I hear a scream, and I look down, and his wife is hitting a sand tiger with a flashlight. And then one of them drags its fin down my stomach. And then takes off. And when they take off, they make this, it sounds like somebody did a cannonball underwater. It just goes, whoop! And I was like, okay, this is different. And they were much more awake and much more hungry at night. So,
rope tail. What about rope tail?
Okay. Sometimes when you get into weird conditions, you get sharks behaving differently. And we were diving the E.M. Clark one time, and my job is to tie the anchor into the wreck. I go down by myself and tie the hook in and get it so that the divers can come down the anchor line. And then when I'm done, I go take pictures and do my thing, you know. But we got down to about 190 feet, and it was like 80 degrees. And then it turned to 60. So the water is all of a sudden a lot colder, and it's like, whoa. We got 2 different currents going in 2 different sections of water. And I started to went down to the bottom, grabbed the anchor, and started pulling it up the wreck to where I was going to tie it. And as I'm picking it up, my foot starts going like this. And I'm going, oh, Dave's messing with me. And then I was like, there's nobody down here with me. And I turned around, and there's a sand tiger with my fin in its mouth, going, shaking. And I was like, what the hell? And kicked at it, and it took off. And as it took off, it had a rope tied around its tail like they tried to pull it into a boat. And I saw the same shark 2 weeks later, and it was still acting weird, but it didn't. But yeah, sometimes you get some different shark behavior than the normal shark behavior.
Let's scare it.
I just want to say next time you're in Hatteras, hit up Jess and Joel at the wreck.
JT needs to remember.
I have been in there many times. Actually, the dive boat I used to work on, JT's right next to the wreck, so he'd take me in there for drinks after work.
So, Panda mentioned that this is a grave for many boats, or some boats. Have you seen our fellow brethren? I mean,
I have never seen human remains underwater. The vessel that I'm always thinking I might see something on is the Monitor, because there are 16 people lost on the Monitor, and they've recovered 2. So there probably are more human remains inside the Monitor. Not yet.
I've seen something that looked an awful lot like a human femur, but I left it where it was and just kept swimming. Not on a wreck up here. It was off of Atlantic Beach.
What are the conditions on the Monitor? The Monitor has kind of, it's upside down, and it's kind of collapsed down in on itself for the most part. But some of the interesting features are still sticking out of that, like the boilers are upside down, and what they didn't recover it's kind of neat diving the Monitor because there's artifacts down there that you're not allowed to take any. And unlike some of the other wreck sites where people do recover artifacts, if we pull a Monitor permit, we're going to be very serious about, hey, you can't bring anything up. So you'll be swimming around and see bottles down there. You'll be swimming around. There's a dead light, which is what would have let light into the vessel from the deck. There's stuff like that still lying around on the Monitor, so it's kind of neat to dive because you will see things you might not see on some of the other shipwrecks.
Are there, I think you mentioned there's another ironclad, one that was in tow.
The Passaic made it to Beaufort that night, or that next day. The Monitor went down. It was the last day of 1862. And the state of Georgia was towing the Passaic. The Rhode Island was towing the Monitor. So the actual first news of the Monitor sinking was delivered by the Passaic when it made it to Beaufort, North Carolina.
And the Passaic is down there too?
No, the Passaic, it was scrapped probably around 1900, I believe. It never was sunk.
But again, the Mariners beat the outside with them, and then the rest of the Monitor, they were, I believe, the EP boat here to the window. It's still in desalination process. I think it's been, 10 years, 12 years?
Closer to 20, I
Closer to
think.
20.
Yeah. Dave was out there the day they brought the turret up. They went by it. I kind of wish it was still down there so I could dive on it, but it's I have to admit, it's really, really cool in the museum, you know. Any other questions?
I do. What is the obviously to get rid of the salt, what is the desalination?
The desalination process. So when something that's been submerged in salt water for a period of time, you bring it to the surface. It's a process where they have it soaking and they're changing out the fresh water, but they also have electrodes hooked up to it and pushing the salt out. But it's a very, very gradual process because they're trying to maintain the integrity of the metal. And if you don't get all of the salt out before they pull the water, with this salt goes right flat. So when you see in movies when they drag stuff up immediately straight to the air and they're like reading it or looking at it.
I don't know if you all know the answer. I was always wondering, because there's so much experience required to navigate the treacherous waters, how are the Germans able to come in and just run willy-nilly and take out so many ships here?
They could go under.
Is that all it was?
Yeah, when the giant storm would start coming through, they could go 100 feet down and just hang out. Yeah, the U-boat had a little bit of advantages, but it was horrible place to be serving. I mean, it was. So you go inside a submarine now that's been decommissioned for years, it still smells like body odor and diesel oil, you know. but you know they could get under.
We have a couple of U-boats, yeah?
We have 4 off the North Carolina coast. One of them's too deep to dive. I've been to the other 3. You've probably been to all of them.
I've done 2.
How did they sink?
One of them was hit by aerial depth charges from a plane. That was the U-701. The USS Roper sank the U-85 off of Nag's Head. The U-352 was depth charged, wasn't it?
The Icarus, I think.
Yeah, by the Icarus. And the U-576 was depth charged right after it sank a ship out. It's way out off of Hatteras called the I don't know, they found the U-576 and the vessel that had sank less than 300 yards apart. So one of them was taken out by a plane. The rest of them were destroyers and Coast Guard cutters.
But no,
Thanks.
You got questions right there?
Yeah, I mean, your purpose is to document all these. How many are too deep, and what efforts are being made to document those? Do you guys have any connections with people that have ROVs or anything?
I do have some connections with people with ROVs. The problem off of Hatteras is the current. And the only time we'd want to use an ROV is real, like beyond diving depths. So you've got to get quite an ROV. So I have yet to encounter anybody who had one that could handle the current.
What's your guys' max that you typically will pass around a deeper?
I'm going to call it quits at 400 feet. You stay down long enough to look at anything much beyond 400 feet, say 425 or so, much below that, your decompression time becomes so high and your bottom time gets so low that it's just like, it's not worth it, and it's so risky.
How many times have you done that?
400 feet? I haven't done 400 feet yet. There's a couple of wrecks that are 390 is one of them, and I'm going to dive that. I'm going to call it quits at 400. We're trying to dive one that's about 300, and we might get to that this year. I don't know. We'll see. We're working on. We're building a team to do it.
How many support people do you have at that depth?
We'd probably have 3 support people at that depth. And
What's the ratio? How many people go that deep and how many people support?
we'd probably put 4 people on the bottom and 3 people supporting them. And we'd have a diver that would meet them at their first decompression stop, a diver that would meet them in the middle, and a diver that would meet them at the top decompression stop. So they're being watched over. Basically, you switch decompression gases a couple times diving really deep. You have what you call your back gas or your bottom gas. That's going to be a trimix. You're going to dive what I would call a low test and a high test decompression gas. Say 50% that you'd start on around 70 feet. And I dive 80%. Some people dive 100 that you start on at 30 or 20 feet. And you'd have a safety diver come down with a bottle of the appropriate gas for that depth and check on you. And if you needed it, they'd give it to you. They could also relay messages to the boat. So it's something we're learning as we go along, the best ways to do it. Any other questions?
You said you're using a GoPro for your video. What kind of camera setup do you use? Is it like just a regular Nikon in a special case, or is it a special camera entirely?
I use a Micro Four Thirds Olympus system because I have to tie the anchor in, and it's about the smallest system I can get that'll take the kind of pictures I want. But yeah, the housing's usually 3 times the cost of the camera.
Where did you guys end up getting all of your tech training?
I got my tech training from a guy who's no longer doing it, and from working with JT Barker. And Jay is an instructor who's very picky about the students he takes. Good technical training is hard to find, and you're looking for somebody who dives the kind of conditions that you dive in. So
The problem is a lot of the tech instructors are more geared towards cave diving, and although that is very dangerous, it's very different than tech diving open water. So
the issue, I think, with Hatteras in North Carolina, and why we kind of get overlooked a lot of times in the technical community, is because of the validity of the conditions. You don't know that you're going to go out. So people plan their trips. They have a certain amount of time. They can allot a certain amount of money. You get down here, you live here, it takes a while to get anywhere. You get down here, you get blown out. You get blown out. You get blown out. That happens a couple of times, and people, I feel like, tend to give up a little bit. You have to be really hard to do stuff.
yeah.
And be ready to go. Just like with, you guys that surf, the water waits for no one. It's good when it's good, and you take the opportunity when you can. But as I said, I just wanted to bring this and make it more publicly available so people understand what we do have on here, because I had no idea.
Probably the big difference in technical diving in North Carolina versus a lot of other places, we have horrendous current. And if you get out to, say, the EM Clark or the Monitor, and you've got 2 knots of current, you have 2 choices. You can either not dive, or if you have the skills, you can hot drop, which is basically they pull the boat a couple hundred yards up into the current away from the wreck, and the divers jump off without an anchor line. So,
That's what I was gearing them up to do.
but there's cool things about not having an anchor line, because when you go up to do your decompression, you shoot what we call an SMB, surface marker buoy, goes up to the surface, the boat follows it. The safety divers start jumping in and checking on you. And you're just hanging out in the current, drifting, rather than holding onto an anchor line like this. You know? So,
I guess it's more similar to like drift diving.
yes, it is. It's deep drift diving. Yeah. And there's a whole skill set to that. And lots of times people think they know how to technical dive, but they've never done things like that. And there's a learning curve for sure.
It's like starting a band on the Outer Banks.
Yes.
You always want to take it one step at a time and get your training, you get your experience and feel completely comfortable. And you change one thing, you don't change 3 things, 4 things, 5 things at one dive. So you've got, if you're going to a new site, you're at a new depth, that's all. Don't bother with the camera, don't bring your pole spear. Get you comfortable where you're at and just continue to collect that experience and move forward.
Yeah, we talked about lionfish, but I don't shoot lionfish deeper than 150 feet. There are other things I need to be concentrating on, not shooting lionfish.
I appreciate you guys coming out tonight and spending your evening with us.
Thank you.
Bye.